I still feel the sharp burning in my eyes every time I close them at night. It is a phantom sensation that doctors say might stay with me forever. It is not just the physical pain that lingers. It is the images burned into my memory. The look on my son's face, shifting from begging to uncontrollable rage. The metallic shine of the drain cleaner bottle catching the kitchen light for a split second. And then the invading darkness mixed with an indescribable pain that stole my breath and dropped me to my knees on the floor I had swept with care so many times. My name is Claire Anderson. For 68 years, I built a life that many would consider lucky. I became a widow young. It is true. But I transformed the small bakery I inherited from my father into Anderson's Bakery. It was the most beloved shop in the heart of our downtown. My hands kneaded dough for weddings, baptisms, and graduations for 3 generations of families. The smell of my bread and pastries became part of the city landscape, just as much as the old churches or the skyline. Raising Gavin alone was never simple. His father, Robert, passed away when Gavin had just turned 5. A car accident on the highway took him in an instant, leaving me with a budding business and a little boy who asked every night when Daddy would come back. I worked 16-hour days. I slept on flour sacks when necessary. I saved every penny so my son could go to the best private school in the city. "You will be someone important," I whispered while tucking him in. "You will make your father proud from heaven." Perhaps that was my first mistake, loading those small shoulders with the weight of such big expectations. Gavin grew up feeling he was never enough, that every achievement was overshadowed by the ghost of an idealized and absent father. He graduated with honors. Yes, but he never found his path. He jumped from job to job, from relationship to relationship, always restless, always looking for something that seemed to slip through his fingers. I did not see the signs, or perhaps I did not want to see them. The sudden disappearances, the loans becoming more frequent, the phone calls at odd hours. It is just a bad streak. I told myself while writing another check to get him out of trouble, all young people go through hard times, but Gavin was no longer young. At 42, his temples were starting to turn gray, and worry lines had permanently settled between his eyebrows. That morning in March, the air in the kitchen was heavy with humidity. The rainy season had started hard, and dark clouds seemed parked over the city. I was preparing my traditional cornbread to take to the bakery. My hands worked the dough by pure muscle memory, a rhythm perfected over decades of practice. I think now with bitter irony that I was so focused on shaping that dough that I failed to shape my own son's character. The slamming door announced his arrival. Gavin entered the kitchen like a hurricane, soaked not by rain but by a cold sweat that made his shirt stick to his body. His eyes were so much like mine, jumping nervously from one side of the room to the other. Unable to hold eye contact with me for more than a second. "I need to talk to you, Mom," he said with a trembling voice. I wiped my hands on the apron embroidered with butterflies, a gift from my friend Rachel on my last birthday. I looked at him closely as he sat across from me. The signs of deterioration were obvious to anyone who wanted to see them. The wrinkled shirt that was once white, fingernails bitten down to the quick, a slight but constant tremor in his hands. My heart sank, but I kept my expression calm. Years of running a business had taught me not to show weakness, not even to my own son. "I am listening," I said simply, continuing my work. The ground corn released its sweet aroma while my fingers formed small rolls that the city would eat for breakfast that morning. "I am in trouble, Mom, serious trouble." He began running his hands through his thinning hair. "The Golden Chip Casino. They gave me credit. I thought I could make it back with a couple of good hands, but the cards did not cooperate, and now—" His voice broke. For the next few minutes, I listened to a story that froze my blood. Astronomical debts with dangerous people, threats that were becoming less veiled, a final deadline to pay that expired in 48 hours. "How much?" I asked finally. When he mentioned the number, my hand stopped involuntarily. It was more than all my savings combined, more than the value of the bakery I had built with decades of work. It was essentially everything I had, Gavin. I sighed deeply. This is not the first time, nor the fifth. I have paid your debts for years, thinking each time would be the last. I have sent you to therapy, to rehab programs. I have given my entire life trying to save you from yourself. I know, Mom. I know. He interrupted desperately. This time is different, I swear. If I get out of this, I will never gamble again. I will sell my condo. I will work double shifts. I will pay back every cent. How many times had I heard those same promises? How many times had I wanted to believe them? But something inside me had hardened over the years, like the crust of my best bread. A sudden clarity invaded me while I watched my son, this familiar stranger trembling in front of me. I will help you, I said finally, but on one condition. His eyes lit up with hope. Anything, Mom. Anything. Inpatient treatment. A full rehabilitation program for gambling addiction. No outpatient treatments this time. A real commitment. The transformation was instant and terrifying. The desperation on his face gave way to something I had never seen in him. Pure, raw hatred. His features twisted into an unrecognizable mask. You think I am sick? He spat the words as if they were poison. The only sick thing is being 80 years old and still controlling every aspect of my life. Do you know what they say about you in the neighborhood? The bread witch. That is what they call you. The old woman who needs money while her son barely survives. Every word was a stab. But I kept my composure. I am not 80 years old, Gavin. I am 68. And if you barely survive, it is by your own choice. He stood up with such force that the chair fell backward, crashing against the tile floor. Always so perfect. The great Claire Anderson. You think I do not know what you did. You think I would never discover the truth. His question threw me off. What truth was he referring to? But before I could question him, I saw him head to the cabinet under the sink where I kept cleaning products. With frantic movements, he started digging through bottles and jars. Gavin, what are you doing? I asked, concern finally breaking my facade of calm. He turned toward me with an expression I did not recognize. In his hand, he held an amber glass bottle I used to clear clogged drains. My maternal instinct triggered every alarm. If you do not want to help me the easy way. He started advancing toward me with deliberately slow steps. Son, think about what you are doing, I said, backing up until I hit the counter. I am your mother. I have given you everything. You have given me nothing. He screamed. You have controlled me. You have judged me. You have made me feel like a failure my whole life. What happened next occurred in slow motion before my eyes. The cap of the bottle flew off. Gavin's arm described an arc in the air. The thick, yellowish liquid flew toward me like a venomous snake. The impact was immediate. Thousands of burning needles piercing my skin, my eyelids, my eyes. A scream that did not seem human escaped my throat as I fell to my knees. The pain was so absolute, so consuming, that for an instant I thought I would die right there on my kitchen floor next to the bread dough that would never be baked. Through the red haze of agony, I felt Gavin kneel beside me. For a fleeting moment, I thought he had reacted, that the horror of his actions had made him come to his senses. I reached my trembling hand toward him, seeking the comfort of the son I once had. It was then that I heard his whisper, cold and calculating, words that would mark the beginning of my metamorphosis. Without seeing it, will be easier to rob you. Between spasms of pain, I heard Gavin's footsteps walking away. The front door slammed shut, leaving me alone with my agony. Time lost all meaning while I dragged myself across the kitchen floor, trying to reach the sink. Every inch was a battle against a pain I never imagined possible. With shaking hands, I managed to open the faucet and put my face under the stream of cold water. the relief was minimal, barely perceptible under the storm of fire consuming my skin. I do not know how much time passed until I heard banging on the door. The voice of Sam, my neighbor for 30 years, reached me muffled through the wood. "Mrs. Anderson, I brought the flower seeds I promised you. Are you home?" I tried to scream, but my throat only produced a harsh, weak sound. Gathering the few forces I had left, I grabbed the coffee grinder from the counter and threw it against the window. The glass shattered, and the noise alerted Sam. What followed was a confusing whirlwind of sirens, medical voices, and the antiseptic smell of St. Gabriel Hospital. I remember fragments. Sam's horrified face when he found me, his steady hands holding mine during the ambulance ride. The paramedics rushed questions about what type of substance had come into contact with my eyes, my son. I managed to articulate between sobs. "Gavin did this to me." The disbelief on their faces was evident even through my blurry and distorted vision. What son would be capable of something like that? Any other day, I myself would have shared that disbelief, but Gavin's whispered words kept echoing in my head like a perverse mantra. "Without seeing it, will be easier to rob you." The doctors worked with clinical efficiency. Endless eye washes, injections for pain that barely mitigated the sensation of having burning coals where my eyes used to be, ointments for the burns spreading across my cheeks and forehead. When they finally finished, they bandaged my eyes and moved me to a private room. "Mrs. Anderson." Dr. Sullivan's voice was grave but compassionate. "We've done everything possible to neutralize the acid, but I must be honest with you. The burns are severe, especially in the left eye. There is damage to the cornea and possibly the retina. It is premature to give a definitive prognosis, but you must prepare for the possibility of significant vision loss." His words hit me like a wrecking ball. How would my life be without being able to see? How would I run the bakery? How would I recognize the faces of my regular customers? How would I read the old love letters Robert wrote me during our courtship? "Is there any chance of total recovery?" I asked with a threat of a voice. The doctor's sigh was answer enough before he spoke. "In cases like yours, it is extremely rare. We can hope for some improvement with time, perhaps some peripheral vision in the right eye, but it would be irresponsible to promise a full recovery." That night, alone in the hospital room, I cried until I ran out of tears. I cried for the light of dawn I might never see again, for the colors of the flower market I visited every Sunday, for the expressions of children when they tasted my sweets for the first time. I cried for the betrayal of my only son, for the maternal love that had been answered with the most visceral hate. But above all, I cried for my own blindness. Not the physical one, but the emotional one that had prevented me from seeing Gavin's true nature for so many years. It was in those dark hours between physical pain and emotional devastation that something extraordinary happened. When I pulled back one of the wet compresses they had placed over my bandages, I noticed a fleeting flash of light from the corner of my right eye. Initially, I thought it was my imagination, a visual memory clinging desperately to my consciousness. But when I moved my head slightly, the flash changed position. With a racing heart, I lifted my hand in front of my face, and there it was, a blurry shadow moving at the edge of my visual field. It was not much, barely diffuse shapes without details or clear colors. But it was vision. My right eye was not completely destroyed. The discovery should have filled me with hope. But instead, an idea began to form in my mind, an idea so bold, so reckless, that it scared me with its calculated coldness. What if I pretended to be completely blind? What if I let Gavin believe his attack had been a total success? What would he reveal? What would he do if he thought I was completely helpless? The decision was not easy or quick. All night I debated with myself the moral and practical aspects of such a deception. Would it not be more sensible to simply report him? Let justice take its course. But then I remembered the countless times I had paid lawyers to get him out of minor trouble, judges who had been lenient because of his good family background, evidence that mysteriously disappeared when he had to face consequences. The judicial system does not always protect the vulnerable, especially when the aggressor knows how to navigate its mazes. When Dr. Sullivan came to check on me the next morning, I had made my decision. "Doctor," I said with a trembling but determined voice, "there is something I must tell you." I told him about the flash of vision in my right eye, but also about my plan. At first, he seemed shocked. "What you are suggesting is ethically questionable, Mrs. Anderson. I cannot falsify medical records to indicate total blindness when residual vision exists. I am not asking you to falsify anything, doctor," I replied. "Just help me protect myself from the person who tried to kill me, because that is what my son did, an attempted homicide. And if I do not manage to prove his intentions, he will try again until he succeeds." I saw the internal struggle reflected on his face. Finally, he sat on the edge of my bed with a sigh of surrender. "I will not falsify reports, but I will not reveal confidential patient information to anyone without your consent either. If you decide not to mention this residual vision, it is your personal decision. It was enough. I did not need his active complicity. Just his professional silence. Over the next few days, while nurses changed my bandages and doctors evaluated the evolution of my burns, I began my transformation. I learned to keep my gaze empty, slightly unfocused, like I had seen in people with real blindness. I practiced for hours moving my hands with the tentative uncertainty of someone who cannot see where they are placing them. I studied the sound of the medical staff's footsteps, identifying them before they announced their presence, only to feign surprise when they spoke. When Gavin finally appeared in my room 5 days after the attack, I was prepared. I heard his hesitant steps at the door, the nervous whisper with the nurse, the uncomfortable throat clearing when he finally entered. "Mom." His voice sounded contrite, rehearsed. "How are you feeling?" I turned my head in the direction of the sound, calculating deliberately wrong, facing my face about 8 inches to his left. "Gavin, is that you?" I asked with a weak voice, reaching my hand toward empty space. I saw him tense up through my limited peripheral vision. His posture changed subtly, shoulders relaxing, back straightening. It was the posture of someone who has just confirmed they have emerged victorious from a battle. "Yes, Mom. It is me." He approached, taking my extended hand with a gentleness he had never shown. The doctors explained everything to me. "I am so sorry. The accident. I interrupted, keeping my face expressionless. "The drain cleaner product." He continued with rehearsed fluency. It slipped from my hands when I was trying to reach something in the cabinet. "It was horrible, Mom. I will never forgive myself." The lie flowed from his lips with such naturalness that for an instant I almost doubted my own memory. But the words he whispered, when he thought no one else could hear him, remained burned into my mind. "Right," I replied after a calculated pause. "An accident. How clumsy of me to be right underneath when it happened." I noticed his momentary discomfort before he regained control of the situation. "The doctors say you will be able to go home in a few days. I have been organizing everything to take care of you. You will leave the bakery in the hands of your employees, and I will take care of you. Everything will be fine, I promise you." While he spoke, I could almost see the gears turning in his head, calculating how to turn my tragedy into his opportunity. The bakery generated good income. The family home in the downtown district was worth a fortune because of its historic location. And then there was Green Valley Estate, the property I inherited from my parents just outside the city. All of it now potentially within his reach, with a blind and helpless mother who would depend completely on him. "You are so good to me," I murmured, playing the role of the grateful mother he expected. I do not know what I would do without you, my son." I felt his hand squeeze mine, a gesture that pretended to seem affectionate but contained a shade of possession that froze my blood. For the next hour, Gavin dedicated himself to detailing all his plans for my new life. He would hire a nurse for basic needs, of course, but he would supervise my finances, my properties, my medical decisions, all for my own good, naturally, all because he loved me and wanted to protect me. When he finally left, promising to return the next day with papers that would need my signature to facilitate the paperwork, I allowed myself to release the breath I had held during his entire visit. The performance had been exhausting, but effective. Gavin had taken the bait completely. That same night, when the nurse on duty, Martha, came to administer my medications, I made an impulsive but necessary decision. "I need to use your phone," I told her in a low voice. "Mrs. Anderson patients are not allowed to," she began. "My son tried to kill me," I interrupted firmly. "And he will try again if I do not get help. Please." Something in my tone must have convinced her, because after a moment of doubt, I felt the weight of the cell phone in my hand. "5 minutes," she whispered, "and I never told you to do it." With trembling fingers, I dialed the number I knew by heart. Sam answered on the second ring. "It is Claire," I said without preamble. "I need your help. But no one must know, especially Gavin." In the few minutes that followed, we established the foundations of what would become my survival plan. Sam, with his military background and meticulous attention to detail, would be my anchor in the outside world. We agreed on a communication system through Martha, who turned out to be his niece, a providential coincidence that I interpreted as a sign that my path, although dark and dangerous, was the right one. When the call ended, I leaned back in the hospital bed with a contradictory mix of emotions. Terror for what awaited me, yes, but also an iron resolution I had not felt in decades. The compliant Claire, the mother who justified every mistake of her son, had died on that kitchen floor. In her place, a woman was born willing to do the unthinkable to survive and get justice. 3 days later, I returned to the house where I lived for more than 4 decades. Gavin insisted on driving me personally from the hospital, narrating the landscape we passed as if he were doing me an extraordinary favor. "We are passing by the city park, Mom. The flowers are beautiful. What a pity you cannot see them," he commented with fake sadness. "Oh, there is a new building on the corner of Main Street. How fast the city changes, right?" Every word was a stab, a deliberate reminder of what I had lost, but I limited myself to nodding and smiling weakly, feeding his sense of power. The less threatening he perceived me, the more careless he would become. Upon arriving home, I was surprised to find Rachel waiting for us at the door. My lifelong friend threw herself on me, hugging me tightly while sobbing against my shoulder. Claire, my dear friend. When Sam told me about the accident, I could not believe it. What horror! What a tragedy! I noticed the immediate tension in Gavin at Rachel's unexpected presence. It was not part of his plan to have witnesses to my return home. "Rachel, what a surprise," he said with barely disguised coldness. "Mom needs to rest now. Maybe you could visit her another day." "Nonsense," Rachel replied with the familiarity of someone who has known Gavin since he was in diapers. "I have prepared everything. Chicken soup, just how Claire likes it. Her favorite sheets with lavender scent. I even rearranged the furniture to make it easier to move without tripping." Through my limited peripheral vision, I saw how Gavin struggled to keep his composure. He had not counted on Rachel's interference in his plans, but contradicting her openly would raise suspicions. "It is very kind, but I am already taking care of everything," he insisted. "I have hired a nurse who will start tomorrow, a professional." "Wonderful," Rachel replied without flinching. "Then you will not mind if I stay tonight with her, right? To facilitate the transition." The silence that followed was tense, loaded with unspoken implications. Finally, Gavin yielded with a forced smile. Of course not. Mom will be delighted with your company. What Gavin did not know was that Rachel's presence was part of my strategy. During that first night at home while he thought we were sleeping, Rachel and I had a crucial conversation in barely audible whispers. I revealed everything to her: the deliberate attack, Gavin's words, my remaining partial vision, the plan that was starting to form. Unlike Dr. Sullivan, Rachel showed no ethical doubts. Her indignation was immediate and visceral. That monster! She hissed with contained fury. I always knew there was something twisted in him, even when he was a child. The way he looked at the neighborhood cats, how he smiled when something upset you. I should have said something. Do not blame yourself, I assured her, squeezing her hand in the dark. I would have refused to listen. A mother rarely wants to see the worst in her child. What do you need from me? She asked without hesitation. Eyes and ears, I replied. You cannot stay permanently. Gavin would find a way to push you out, but you can visit regularly, observe changes in the house, notify Sam if something seems suspicious, and above all, help me contact someone else. Who? Lieutenant Evans. I said the name Sam had given me. A police officer who cannot be bought easily. If we are going to catch Gavin, we will need irrefutable proof and authorities willing to act when we have it. The days following my return home were a strange dance between predator and prey. Me feigning absolute helplessness. Gavin playing the role of devoted son while weaving his web around me. Every morning he entered my room with an exaggerated "Good morning, Mommy," which he had never used before, bringing breakfasts that he carelessly left out of my reach. "Oh, sorry," he would say with fake concern when I groped the air looking for the coffee mug. "I am still not used to your condition." I learned to move through my own house as if it were an unknown maze, calculating every step with the insecurity expected of someone recently deprived of vision. I bumped occasionally into furniture that had been in the same place for decades. I spilled liquids accidentally. I searched for light switches out of pure habit, all part of a carefully designed choreography to feed Gavin's confidence in my incapacity. The nurse he hired, Martha, turned out to be an unexpected blessing. A strict but fair woman in her 50s who soon developed an evident contempt for Gavin and his condescending manners. During our hygiene sessions and bandage changes, when we were sure to be alone, she began to whisper observations to me. "Your son was going through the documents on your desk last night, ma'am. He photographed several with his phone. Oh, he has visitors when you sleep. Men who speak in low voices, who smell like expensive tobacco and cheap cologne." Without knowing it, Martha became another vital piece of my information network. I never revealed my secret to her. The fewer people who knew, the safer I would be. But her maternal instinct naturally put her on my side. 2 weeks after the attack, Gavin started bringing me documents to sign. "Simple paperwork to manage the bakery while you recover," he explained with a carefree tone. "Oh, it is just to update your medical insurance. Nothing important." With my right hand, I held my left wrist under the table, pinching it painfully every time I had to sign. The pain helped me keep the signature shaky, unrecognizable compared to my usual precise and fluid signature. It was a small victory. Documents with such different signatures could be legally questioned later. The first bank transfers began to happen, small sums at first, modest enough not to raise alarms at the bank. $500 here. $800 there. Through Rachel, who visited regularly bringing homemade food and neighborhood gossip, I maintained contact with Sam, who in turn meticulously documented every suspicious financial movement. One particularly significant afternoon, I heard Gavin talking on the phone in the garden, believing me asleep in my room. Thanks to my limited peripheral vision and mirrors strategically placed by Rachel at my window, I could watch him from my bed without him knowing. "I tell you, it is perfect," he was saying with barely contained enthusiasm. "She is completely blind and helpless. In 2 months, I will have transferred enough to pay half the debt. And when we sell the Green Valley estate, we will liquidate the rest. Yes, yes, it is a matter of time. Until she signs the property transfer. No, she suspects nothing. She believes every word I say. The bakery, of course, is also included in the plan. It is worth a fortune just for the location in the historic downtown. No, do not worry about her. At her age and in her condition, an accident can happen at any time. An unfortunate fall down the stairs, perhaps. My blood froze in my veins. It was not just my money he was after. He was planning my death. An accidental fall that would eliminate the last obstacle between him and my complete estate. Fear paralyzed me momentarily, but it was quickly replaced by an iron determination. It was a race against time, and the finish line was literally my survival. That night I waited until I heard Gavin snoring from his room. I got up stealthily, and guiding myself by the blurry outlines I could distinguish, I reached the kitchen phone. I had memorized the number Sam gave me during his last casual visit to the house. "Lieutenant Evans," I whispered when a raspy voice answered on the other end of the line. "This is Claire Anderson. Sam told you about me. I need your help urgently. My son is planning to kill me." 2 days later, under the pretext of a medical appointment, Sam picked me up to take me to Dr. Sullivan's office. In reality, we headed to a discreet coffee shop in a neighborhood far from downtown. There, at a secluded table in the darkest corner of the place, Lieutenant Evans was waiting for me. "Mrs. Anderson." His voice was deep but kind. His hands rough when he shook mine. "Sam has brought me up to speed on your situation. I must say, your plan is unconventional. Desperation breeds desperate strategies, Lieutenant." I replied, keeping my gaze deliberately unfocused. Even though, in the dim light of the cafe with my dark glasses, no one would notice, I could partially see. For the next hour, I explained all the details. The acid attack, Gavin's revealing words, the bank transfers that had started, the phone conversation I had witnessed about my future accidents. "What you describe are several serious crimes." The lieutenant commented after listening to me carefully. "Attempted homicide, financial fraud, document forgery, but we need concrete proof, evidence that no lawyer can discredit." "What do you suggest?" Sam asked. "Always practical." "Hidden microphones," Evans replied without hesitation. "Cameras in strategic points of the house. We need to capture confessions, incriminating conversations, access to documents and accounts without authorization. Is it legal?" I questioned. Although at that point, legality worried me less than my survival. In normal circumstances, it would require a court order, he admitted. But since it is your property, if you install the devices voluntarily as a personal security measure, facing a credible threat against your life, there is a certain gray area we could use. It was not the most comforting answer, but it was enough. We agreed on the logistical details. Sam would provide access to the house when Gavin was away. Robert, Evan's nephew who specialized in security systems, would install the equipment discreetly. My lawyer, Lucy, who specialized in family abuse cases, would prepare the legal strategy for when we had enough proof. "One more thing," Evans added before ending our meeting. "Your son has connections at the Golden Chip. That place is under investigation for money laundering and other illicit activities. The men he owes money to are not simple loan sharks. They are dangerous criminals. We must act with extreme caution." That information added a new dimension of danger to my situation. Not only was I dealing with my own treacherous son, but with an entire criminal network that had interests in my assets. During the following weeks, our operation unfolded with the precision of a Swiss watch. I used every absence of Gavin to allow small modifications in the house. A repositioned painting hiding a tiny camera, a decorative vase with a microphone in its base. Even my own white cane was equipped with a recording device. My performance as a blind woman was perfected until it became second nature. I learned to use the Braille system the hospital social worker taught me. even though I could vaguely distinguish printed letters with my peripheral vision. I started attending occupational therapy at the Vision Rehabilitation Center, where I learned genuine techniques to navigate as a non-sighted person, which I incorporated into my repertoire of deceptions. Dr. Veronica, the psychologist at the Institute, became another unexpected ally. During a particularly emotional session when we were sure to be alone, I revealed part of my truth. "I am not completely blind, doctor," I confessed in a low voice. Her expression went from surprise to confusion. "Are you saying you have recovered part of your vision? That would be wonderful. But why pretend then? Because the man who did this to me, my own son, believes he achieved his goal, and I need him to keep believing it until I can prove it." After a long silence, she replied, "As a health professional, I cannot actively participate in a deception. But as a woman who has seen too many cases of family violence go unpunished, I will not interfere with what you consider necessary for your safety." Her discreet approval meant more than I could express. She provided valuable information on how blind people really navigate the world. Small details that would make my performance more convincing. How recent blind people tend to keep their eyes open, unlike those blind from birth. How they turn their head toward sounds, how their facial expressions can seem disconnected from the conversation due to lack of visual feedback. Meanwhile, the evidence against Gavin accumulated day after day. The cameras captured images of him going through my personal documents, accessing my computer, talking on the phone about properties he planned to sell. The microphones recorded conversations with his accomplices from the casino, discussions on how to speed up transfers without raising suspicions, even explorations on what medications could cause a cardiac arrest that would look natural in an older woman. One particularly revealing night, Gavin brought home 2 men I had never seen. From my room, pretending to be deeply asleep, I heard them talking in the study. "The land at Green Valley Estate is worth a fortune," one of them was saying, "especially now that they approved the construction of the new highway. You could pay your entire debt just with that property." "The problem is getting her to sign," Gavin replied. Lately, she has become suspiciously reluctant, even in her state, as if something made her doubt. "Did you not say she is completely blind?" the second man asked, his voice a threatening baritone. "Blind people are easy to fool. You put a paper in front of them. You tell them it is one thing when it is another." "I have tried." The frustration in Gavin's voice was palpable. "But that old fox is smarter than she looks. She insists that Rachel or Sam read all documents to her before signing, then eliminate those nosy friends from the picture." The first man suggested with chilling casualness, "An accident, a threat, whatever is necessary, or speed up the process with the old lady." Added the second, "The boss will not wait forever for his money. You have a month, Gavin, a month to pay, or to provide real guarantees, not promises." Fear invaded me like an icy wave. Not only was my life in danger now, but also those of my faithful friends. We needed to act before Gavin found himself cornered by his creditors and took drastic measures. The next day, during a scheduled visit from Rachel, I managed to pass her a note detailing the conversation I had witnessed. She paled visibly, but kept her composure while continuing to chatter about neighborhood gossip, aware that Gavin might be listening. That same afternoon, I received a wrong number call, which was actually from Lieutenant Evans. "Mrs. Anderson, the situation has escalated. We have enough evidence to proceed legally, but now there is an immediate risk for you and your associates. We must speed up the plan." "How?" I asked, pretending to talk to a friend from church for the benefit of Gavin, who was hovering nearby. "The Green Valley Estate. Gavin is obsessed with obtaining it. Propose going there for the weekend to say goodbye to the place before transferring it to him. It is isolated, perfect for getting a full confession without interruptions. We will have agents stationed in the surroundings." The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Isolate Gavin, far from his accomplices, in an environment where he would feel confident to speak freely, believing no one else could hear him. That night during dinner, I cast my bait, Gavin, I said with a tired voice stirring absently the soup I had barely tasted. I have been thinking about the estate. The clinking of his spoon falling onto the plate revealed his immediate interest. The estate. What about it? I think it should be yours. I continued carefully measuring every word. What sense is there for an old blind woman to keep a property she cannot even appreciate visually? Those landscapes, the sunrises over the mountains, they are just memories now. The change in his energy was immediate and palpable. He straightened in his chair. His breathing accelerated slightly. It was the posture of a predator finally seeing his prey get tired. Are you sure, Mom? It is a big decision. Absolutely, I affirmed with conviction. We could go this weekend to sign the transfer. I will invite the banker to bring the necessary documents. Excellent idea. He agreed quickly, barely containing his enthusiasm. I will handle everything. It will be a special weekend. Yes, I replied serenely while taking a sip of water to hide my smile. With all certainty, it will be unforgettable. That night, while listening to Gavin talk on the phone in the garden, excitedly sharing the news with his cronies, I mentally finalized the details of my counteroffensive. Green Valley Estate would be the perfect stage for the final act of this tragic family play. Isolated enough for Gavin to feel safe showing his true face, but close enough for authorities to arrive quickly when called. As I prepared to sleep, I passed my fingers gently over the scars around my eyes, permanent marks of Gavin's betrayal, but also symbols of my resilience. The acid that should have blinded me ended up opening my eyes to a truth I refused to see for years. In the darkness of my room, I allowed myself a small smile of anticipation. In a few days, this charade would come to an end. Gavin would discover that his helpless victim had transformed into his relentless judge, and I finally could drop the mask of blindness that had protected and imprisoned me for so long. The board was set. The pieces positioned. The final move would be at the estate, where the son who tried to blind his mother would discover that even with limited vision, I saw much more than he had ever imagined. Saturday dawn brought a clear sky and fresh air coming down from the hills, as if nature itself wanted to witness clearly the outcome of my story. I woke up before the roosters, mentally reviewing every detail of the plan. The night before, Gavin had meticulously prepared our trip. Light suitcases, provisions for 2 days, legal documents organized in manila folders. His efficiency, which in another context would have been admirable, acquired a sinister tint under the light of his true intentions. While I dressed with deliberately slow and clumsy movements, typical of someone who cannot see what they are doing, I listened to Gavin humming happily in the kitchen, a nursery rhyme I used to sing to him when he was little. The inconsistency between that tender memory and our current reality caused a lump in my throat that I had to force myself to dissolve. "Ready for our little trip, Mom?" he asked, entering my room without knocking, an intrusion that had become habitual since my supposed blindness, as ready as an old woman can be to say goodbye to her memories. I replied, allowing my voice to break slightly. Feigned vulnerability was just another tool in my arsenal. The car ride from the city to the estate took a little under 2 hours. Gavin drove with barely contained haste, speeding on the straights, taking curves with a reckless confidence that made me cling to the seat. During the journey, he maintained incessant chatter about the wonders he planned for the future of the estate. We could turn the East Wing into a spa, he rambled enthusiastically. Luxury tourism is booming. And with those panoramic views, imagine the prices we could charge. I nodded occasionally, mumbling vague sounds of approval, while my mind was busy checking every element of my preparation. Under the left sleeve of my blouse, I wore a tiny microphone taped with medical tape, developed specifically for this operation. The device transmitted in real time to receivers located in vehicles stationed strategically at the edge of the property, where Lieutenant Evans and his team were waiting. When finally the car began to descend the dirt road leading to the estate, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination hardening in my chest. The main house emerged after a curve, a century-old construction of stone and wood with red tile roofs and a wide porch surrounding the structure. The place where my parents had raised cattle, where Robert had proposed to me under the old oak tree, where Gavin had taken his first steps among chickens and sheepdogs. Home sweet home. Gavin commented with a tone that combined nostalgia and greed while parking in front of the main entrance. The house was surprisingly well maintained. We had hired a local groundskeeper to take care of the property during our absences, which had become longer in recent years. The smell of freshly cut wood and fresh herbs indicated someone had prepared the place for our arrival. "The bank will send its representative tomorrow morning," Gavin announced while taking the suitcases inside, "so we will have time to tour the property, for old time's sake." His consideration was as fake as my blindness. I knew from Lieutenant Evans that no bank official was coming. The plan was simple. We needed Gavin to feel safe, confident that we were completely alone so he would lower his guard and reveal his true intentions. During the afternoon, Gavin insisted on taking a walk through the estate grounds. He guided me with exaggerated solicitude, describing non-existent changes in the landscape, inventing improvements in infrastructure that remained exactly as I remembered them. My white cane tapped rhythmically on the ground as we walked, every impact registering our conversation with perfect clarity. After the walk, Gavin prepared herbal tea, which we served on the wide porch. The sun began to set, painting the surrounding mountains with golden and purple hues. Through my limited peripheral vision, I could appreciate fragments of that spectacle I had contemplated fully so many times in happier days. It is curious. I commented, gently rocking the cup in my hands. When I lost my sight, I thought the hardest thing would be not seeing loved faces, the landscapes, the colors. But I discovered that what is truly painful is not being able to read intentions in people's eyes, becoming vulnerable to deceptions I would have detected instantly before. Gavin tensed imperceptibly. "Life takes unexpected turns," he replied vaguely. "But you have me to protect you, Mom. I will always be looking out for your interests." "My interests?" I asked with feigned innocence. "Or yours?" A dense silence settled between us, broken only by the singing of crickets starting their night symphony. "What are you insinuating?" His voice acquired a defensive edge. "Nothing, son. Just reflecting out loud." The conversation drifted toward lighter topics during dinner, which consisted of simple dishes Gavin had brought prepared from the city. I avoided the wine he offered repeatedly, aware that I would need all my senses alert for what was coming. When night fell completely over the estate, we moved to the main living room. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, fighting the mountain chill that always descended with darkness. I settled into an old leather armchair that had belonged to my father, while Gavin poured brandy into 2 crystal glasses. To new beginnings. He toasted, extending a glass toward me. I took it with studied care, pretending to grope for the glass. "What kind of new beginnings do you have in mind, Gavin? For you, peace and tranquility. No financial worries, no responsibilities. I will take care of everything, just like you took care of me the day I was making bread in the kitchen." I dropped the question like someone dropping a bomb with lethal softness. Gavin's glass produced a sharp clink as it was placed abruptly on the coffee table. "It was an accident, Mom. We have already discussed this." It was time to press, to push him toward the confession we needed to capture. I took off my dark glasses with deliberate slowness, exposing my damaged eyes to the flickering light of the fire. "Do you know what is the most painful thing about being blind, son? It is not the constant darkness. It is knowing that the last image burned into my memory is the face of my only son while he threw acid into my eyes." "Are you confused?" he replied quickly, but his voice had lost firmness. "The trauma, the medications. You are mixing reality with nightmares." Nightmares, I repeated with bitterness. Is it a nightmare to clearly remember how you said without seeing it will be easier to rob you? Because I remember it, Gavin. Every word, every inflection of your voice. He stood up abruptly, walking nervously toward the window overlooking the back garden. I watched him through my peripheral vision, his silhouette cut against the blackness of the night. His shoulders were tense, his hands restless. Have you been talking to someone? He accused, finally turning toward me. Sam, Rachel. They are filling your head with absurd ideas. No one needs to tell me what I saw with my own eyes before losing them, I replied calmly. What I need to understand is why. Why would your own son try to destroy me so cruelly? You know nothing. He exploded, finally punching the wall. You and your damn bakery, your spotless reputation, the great Claire Anderson, example for the whole community. Do you have any idea what it is to live under your shadow? Being always Claire's son and never Gavin. His words gushed like an uncontainable torrent, years of resentment overflowing in the quiet of the night. I tried everything, studying, working in respectable companies, even opening my own business. But nothing was enough, nothing compared to your success, and meanwhile you kept growing, expanding, accumulating properties, recognition, money that should be mine by right. I repeated, genuinely surprised by the magnitude of his distortion. Every penny I earned with decades of honest work, waking up before dawn, going to bed after midnight, saving to give you the education your father and I never had. Lies. He screamed, getting dangerously close. Do you think I do not know where the money really came from to buy the house downtown or this estate? My father was not the saint you pretend. He had shady dealings with local landowners, and you knew it. You are as guilty as him. The accusation left me momentarily speechless. Where had he gotten such a fantasy? Robert had been an accountant at a textile company, an honest man to the core who died in a car accident when returning from visiting a client. Your father was an honorable man. I responded, finally standing up from the armchair with dignity. And you have disgraced his memory with every one of your actions. Do not talk to me about honor, he snapped, closing the distance between us. His warm breath, smelling of brandy, brushed my face. At least I had the courage to do what was necessary. You are just a hypocritical old woman clinging to her money while her son drowns in debt. Courage. I asked, keeping my voice controlled despite the fear I felt at his threatening proximity. You call attacking your own mother from behind courage, trying to blind her to steal what she has built. For an instant I saw doubt in his features, as if a small part of the child I had raised tried to surface. But it disappeared quickly, replaced by a calculating coldness that was completely alien to me. It was an act of poetic justice, he said with a twisted smile. You have always been blind to reality. I just made literal what was already figurative, and the plans for my accident. I asked, taking another step toward the precipice of truth, is it also poetic justice to plan your mother's death? The surprise on his face was genuine. How? The walls hear sun, even for the blind. Understanding transformed his features gradually. You have been pretending, he whispered, backing up a step. You can see. It was the moment of final revelation. With a fluid movement that contradicted my previous hesitant gestures, I fixed my eyes directly on his without the deviation that had characterized my gaze for months. Not completely, I admitted. The acid severely damaged my left eye and part of the right, but I retain limited peripheral vision, enough to have documented every one of your manipulations, every forged document, every incriminating conversation. Gavin paled visibly, his mind quickly processing the implications. All this time you have been acting. I learned from the best, I replied with bitter irony. Have you not been playing the role of devoted son while planning my death? His expression shifted from shock to fury in seconds. "Damn you," he roared, lunging at me with hands extended toward my neck. Anticipating his reaction, I stepped aside with agility I had not shown in months. Gavin stumbled forward, unbalanced by his own momentum and the brandy he had consumed generously. Taking advantage of his confusion, I pressed the small emergency button hidden in my white cane, the agreed signal for Lieutenant Evans and his team to intervene. "It is over, Gavin," I declared with a firm voice, keeping distance while he recovered. "Every word you said tonight has been recorded. Agents are surrounding the estate as we speak." As if to confirm my words, the sound of vehicles approaching on the access road broke the night stillness. Police lights began to flash, illuminating the room intermittently through the windows. "Liar!" Gavin screamed, desperation replacing fury. "You have nothing on me. Your word against mine." At that moment, the front door burst open. Lieutenant Evans entered first, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Sam and Rachel entered behind them, their faces showing a mix of relief and sadness. "Gavin Anderson," Evans announced formally, "you are under arrest for attempted homicide, financial fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." While he recited legal rights, the officers proceeded to handcuff my son, who seemed to have entered a state of shock. His eyes, so much like mine, were wide in absolute bewilderment, as if he could not believe his meticulous plan had collapsed so spectacularly. "Mom," he muttered as he passed me escorted toward the exit, "you cannot do this. I am your son, precisely because you are my son." I responded with pain but firmness. "I cannot allow you to continue on this destructive path. True love implies responsibility even when it hurts." Once Gavin was put into the police vehicle, I let myself fall heavily onto the sofa, feeling months of tension leave my body, leaving me exhausted but strangely light. Rachel sat beside me, taking my hands in hers. "You did it, Claire." She whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "It is over." "No," I corrected gently, looking out the window as the police convoy drove away, taking the son I had loved my whole life. "The real challenge is just beginning." Lieutenant Evans approached, holding a small recorder. "We have everything we needed and more. His confession is irrefutable. With the evidence accumulated during these months, he will face a considerable sentence." I nodded slowly, thanking his efficiency, but finding no satisfaction in the result. There were no winners in this story, only different degrees of loss and pain. I spent that night at the estate, refusing to return immediately to the city. I needed space to process everything that happened, to reconcile with the new reality I had helped create. Sam and Rachel insisted on staying with me, taking turns keeping watch, even though there was no immediate danger anymore. At dawn, I went out to the front porch with a steaming cup of coffee in my hands. The sun emerged lazily between the hills, gilding the tops of the ancient trees bordering the property. With my limited vision, I barely distinguished fragments of that spectacle, but it was enough to fill me with a strange peace. Justice had been done, yes, but at a terrible price. I had lost my son twice. First, when he decided my assets were worth more than my life. Second, when I was forced to hand him over to authorities to stop his spiral of destruction. While I contemplated the new day being born over the lands that had witnessed so much joy and now so much pain, I understood my journey was just beginning. Reconstruction would be slow and painful, both of my partially lost vision and my completely transformed life. But for the first time in a long while, I could see the path ahead clearly, even through damaged eyes. I would no longer need to feign blindness or vulnerability. I would no longer live fearing betrayal from the one who should protect me most. I was free at last from the darkness I had chosen to inhabit to survive. The white cane that had been my crutch and my weapon rested now by the door, a reminder of the woman I had been forced to become. I would use it for practical necessity, not for deception. My scars, both the visible ones around my eyes and the invisible ones in my heart, would be part of me forever. But they would no longer define my complete existence. The truth, like acid, burned on contact. But unlike acid, the truth could also heal, purify, liberate. And while the sun ascended fully over the hills, illuminating every corner of Green Valley Estate, I promised myself to embrace that truth, however painful it might be, and build with it a future that neither betrayal nor hate could threaten again. 3 weeks after Gavin's arrest, I sat across from the district attorney in his office at the Judicial Center. The smell of old books and fresh coffee filled the air, while the official, a man in his 60s with deep wrinkles on his forehead, meticulously reviewed a file on his mahogany desk. "Mr. Anderson." He began finally taking off his reading glasses with a tired gesture. "We have a solid case against your son. The evidence is overwhelming. Recorded confessions, forged documents, testimonies from his accomplices who have decided to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of every word like stones on my chest. However, he continued leaning forward with a worried expression. "We have discovered something during the investigation that complicates things." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" The DA extracted a different folder from his drawer, this one, with a red confidentiality stamp. "During the search of the Golden Chip Casino, our agents seized documents and electronic equipment. Among them, we found this." He slid a photograph toward me. It showed 2 men talking in what seemed to be a luxurious office. One was clearly Gavin. The other was identical to him except for a scar running down the right side of his face, from temple to lip corner. "I do not understand," I mumbled, although a terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. "Who is this man?" "According to records, we have been able to verify," the DA replied cautiously. "His name is Mark, but we have run facial recognition tests, and there is a 99.8% probability that he is a direct relative of your son. A twin, to be precise." The room began to spin around me. I held onto the edge of the desk to keep balance while scattered fragments of memories began to align in my mind like pieces of a macabre puzzle. That difficult pregnancy, the doctors warning me there were complications, the premature traumatic birth, me unconscious for days due to severe hemorrhaging, Robert with a devastated expression informing me that only one of our twins had survived. It is not possible. I whispered more to myself than the DA. "The other baby died at birth." "I am afraid not, Mrs. Anderson," intervened Lieutenant Evans, who had remained silent in a corner of the office until then. "We have investigated exhaustively. Your husband gave the second twin to his cousin in Colombia, Helen, who could not have children. The death certificate was forged. Robert's betrayal hit me like a physical slap. The man I had loved, idealized, and mourned for decades had lied about something so fundamental. He had separated our children, depriving me of one of them, denying both the twin bond that should have been theirs by right. Why? It was the only thing I could articulate. According to Helen's testimony, whom we located, the lieutenant explained, Robert considered it would be impossible to raise 2 babies with the limited resources they had then. You had just inherited the small bakery from your father. You were barely surviving financially. Helen could not conceive, and her husband was a prosperous businessman. He believed he was giving the child a chance at a better life. My mind traveled 4 decades back to those first years of constant struggle, of grueling work to keep the bakery going while raising Gavin. Could I have handled 2 babies? The honest answer was probably no, at least not without even greater sacrifices. But the decision should never have been Robert's alone. Mark knows. I began unable to finish the question. "Yes," confirmed the DA. "He discovered the truth about 5 years ago when Helen fell ill and, fearing death, confessed everything to him. Since then, he has been watching you and Gavin." A chill ran through me, thinking of this unknown son watching us from the shadows, accumulating resentment for a life he never had, for a mother who never looked for him because she believed he was dead. What does all this have to do with the case against Gavin? I asked, trying to reconnect the dots. Lieutenant Evans approached the desk, extracting more photographs from the file. They were security camera captures, recorded conversations, electronic messages. All showed Mark interacting with the owners of the Golden Chip Casino, with loan sharks, with Gavin. Mark introduced himself to Gavin as an investor interested in financing his projects, explained Evans. He never revealed his true identity. Over 3 years, he systematically entangled him in growing debts. He introduced him to gambling, lent him money he knew he could not pay back, exposed him to dangerous people, and when the situation became desperate, I continued starting to see the pattern. Exactly, nodded the DA. It was Mark who began planting the idea that you were an obstacle, that your money could solve all of Gavin's problems. In recordings found in his apartment, we can clearly hear how he suggests, without saying it explicitly, that a blind mother would be easier to manipulate. I brought my hands to my face, feeling the whole world crumbling under my feet. Are you saying that my own son, my unknown son, orchestrated all this? That he manipulated Gavin to attack me? The evidence is conclusive, confirmed the DA. Mark executed a vengeance meticulously planned for years. His goal was not just you, but to destroy the entire family that was denied to him. He wanted Gavin to become the instrument of his revenge, that you suffer the ultimate betrayal at the hands of your favorite son, and that Gavin end up in prison losing everything you had given him. Where is he now? I asked with a voice barely audible. He was detained yesterday attempting to leave the country, replied Evans. He is in custody, refusing to speak to anyone except you. The request took me by surprise. This lost son, this architect of my suffering, wanted to see me. After processing the initial shock, an unusual clarity invaded my mind. Of course I had to see him. I needed to look into the eyes of the man who had designed my ordeal, the son I never knew, Gavin's twin, whose existence I had ignored my whole life. 3 days later, I entered a visiting room at the Provisional Detention Center. Unlike regular cells, this space tried to maintain some dignity. A metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs equally secured, walls of an institutional cream color that pretended to be comforting but only managed to look sickly. When the door opened and Mark entered, escorted by 2 guards, I felt like I was looking into a distorted mirror of the past. It was Gavin, and it was not. The same eyes, the same bone structure, but there was something fundamentally different in his posture, in the way he evaluated me without blinking. The scar crossing his face seemed almost deliberate, as if the universe had wanted to physically mark the difference between the twins life had separated. The guards handcuffed him to a metal ring on the table before withdrawing discreetly toward the door. We remained in silence, studying each other. What do you say to a son you never knew, to a son who orchestrated your destruction? You look like her. Were his first words spoken with a barely perceptible accent. Like Helen, you have the same way of holding your head, slightly tilted, as if preparing to receive a blow. It was not what I expected to hear. Was she good to you? I asked, surprising myself by wanting to know about the woman who had raised my son. A shadow of emotion crossed his face. The best. She gave me everything she could, educated me, protected me from her husband when he drank too much. I never lacked anything material. Except the truth, I added softly. Except that. He agreed, his fingers drumming rhythmically on the metal table, until cancer forced her to confess everything. How convenient, right? Waiting until the end to tell me my entire life was a lie. I perceived the pain under his bitterness, so familiar and yet so alien. I cannot imagine what you felt. No? His laugh lacked humor. Imagine discovering your father gave you away as if you were an unwanted puppy, that your biological mother never looked for you, never questioned the story of your supposed death, that you have a twin brother who grew up receiving everything that was denied to you, the family name, the inheritance, the unconditional love of a mother. Every word was like a poisoned dagger, but I forced myself to keep composure. I never knew you existed, Mark. Robert told me you had died during birth. I cried for you for months, years. I kept a lock of your hair, the only tangible memory they allowed me to keep, in a locket I wore until Gavin turned 10. Something in his expression wavered as if a tiny crack appeared in his armor of hate. Do you have any proof of that, or do you expect me to blindly believe the woman who allowed me to be snatched from her side? Without answering directly, I opened the small purse I had brought with me and extracted an object wrapped in a silk handkerchief. I unwrapped it slowly on the table, an oval locket of aged silver. I found it among my things after Gavin was arrested. I explained while opening the delicate mechanism. Inside, protected by tiny glass, was a lock of dark hair, tied with a faded blue thread. Here is the date, the day you were born, the day I lost you. Mark stared at the locket, his expression decipherable. He extended a handcuffed hand to touch it, but stopped halfway, as if fearing it might disintegrate on contact. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked finally, his voice barely a whisper. "Because you deserve to know you were loved, that you were mourned, that you were never forgotten." I replied simply, "What Robert did was unforgivable. He stole your identity, your family, your connection with your brother. He stole from all of us the possibility of being a complete family." A heavy silence fell between us, full of 4 decades of absence, of lost opportunities, of paths that never crossed. "Do you know what is most ironic?" Mark asked finally, with a twisted smile that did not reach his eyes. "That everything I did to destroy you ended up revealing the truth that was denied to me for so long. If I had not orchestrated this revenge, we probably never would have met. A truth bought at too high a price." I replied, thinking of Gavin locked in another section of the same prison, of my damaged eyes, of the spiral of destruction that had enveloped our fragmented family. Gavin lost his freedom. I lost part of my vision. You lost years of your life planning revenge against people who were as much victims as you. Mark looked away, observing an undefined spot on the wall. "When I discovered the truth, I hired private detectives. I watched you for months. I saw how you treated Gavin, how you gave him everything he asked for, how you justified every one of his failures. You seemed so perfect, so selfless. I hated you with every fiber of my being. It was not perfection," I corrected gently. "It was compensation. I always felt I had failed Gavin by not being able to give him a father, a complete family. I tried to fill all the voids being mother and father at once, and in the process, I spoiled him, overprotected him, prevented him from facing the consequences of his actions. My love, although sincere, was distorted by guilt. Guilt." He repeated, savoring the word as if it were a new concept. "Helen also lived consumed by guilt, for participating in the deception, for stealing me from my true family. She went out of her way pleasing me, giving me everything material she could. Maybe we are more alike than you think, Gavin and I, both molded by mothers who compensated out of guilt." The observation, as sharp as it was painful, left me momentarily speechless. There was an undeniable truth in it, a disturbing symmetry in our parallel lives. "What will happen now?" I asked finally. "I will face a trial," he replied with clinical pragmatism. "Conspiracy, incitement to crime, fraud, extortion. The list is long. I will probably spend the next 15 to 20 years in prison, if I am lucky. And Gavin." A flash of something like remorse crossed his face. "His case is more complicated. He executed the physical attack, but there is substantial evidence of prolonged psychological manipulation. His lawyer is arguing diminished capacity due to coercion. He will probably get a reduced sentence, especially if he cooperates fully testifying against me. The idea that both brothers separated at birth, reunited by tragedy, would spend years locked in the same prison was unbearably cruel to me. I will speak to the prosecutor. I decided in that moment. I will testify in favor of clemency for both. Mark looked at me with genuine surprise. Why would you do something like that? After everything I caused? Because I am your mother, I replied simply. To both of you. And I have already lost 40 years we could have shared. I do not want to lose 40 more. His eyes, so identical to Gavin's, moistened briefly before he regained control. It might be too late to fix what is broken. It is never too late to try. I replied, placing the locket on the table between us. This locket kept the memory of a lost son for decades. Now it can be the beginning of something new if you so decide. When I left the detention center that afternoon, the setting sun bathed the city with a golden light that seemed to transform it into something ethereal, almost dreamlike. I stopped in the square in front of the building, letting the bustle of daily life wrap around me. Street vendors shouting their wares, children chasing each other laughing, old men chatting on worn stone benches. Life continued unstoppable, indifferent to our personal tragedies. And in that continuity, there was something deeply comforting. The world had not stopped when I lost part of my vision, when I discovered my son's betrayal. When they revealed I had another son whose existence I had ignored for 4 decades. My path forward would be different than I had imagined, more complex, more difficult, but also potentially richer in meaning. I had 2 sons now, both lost in their own way, both in need of redemption and healing. The following weeks brought a frenetic activity of lawyers' hearing statements. I kept my promise to advocate for clemency for both twins, recounting the full story. Robert's original lie, Mark's manipulation, Gavin's vulnerability. The judge, impressed by the exceptional circumstances of the case, seriously considered my arguments. Finally, a judicial agreement was reached. Gavin would receive a reduced sentence of 5 years, with possibility of parole after 3 conditioned on intensive psychological therapy and supervised community service. Mark, as the intellectual architect of the whole plan, would face 10 years also, with mandatory therapy and possibility of review after 7 years for good behavior. The real work, however, was just beginning. Rebuilding relationships destroyed by deception and resentment would require more than reduced sentences and good intentions. It would require patience, commitment, and a capacity for forgiveness I sometimes doubted I possessed. My first step was selling Green Valley Estate. Too many painful memories inhabited those century-old walls. With part of the money, I bought land near the downtown area and began construction of what would become the New Light Center, a space dedicated to the rehabilitation of visually impaired people and victims of family violence. The bakery continued to operate under Rachel's management, who turned out to have an innate talent for business that had remained dormant for decades. Every morning, the smell of freshly baked bread continued to wake up the neighborhood, a reminder that some traditions could survive even the worst storms. With my vision partially recovered thanks to experimental surgery, I could distinguish shapes and colors enough to move with relative independence. The white cane remained my constant companion, but now it was a practical tool, not an element of an elaborate farce. I visited Gavin and Mark regularly in prison, at first separately respecting their mutual hostility. Over time, we began joint family therapy sessions, painfully honest but incrementally healing. Little by little, the twins began to recognize their reflection in the other. Same unconscious gestures, similar thought patterns, identical reactions to specific situations. The biological connection denied to them began to manifest shyly but persistently across 4 decades of separation. We are like 2 versions of the same story. Gavin commented during a particular session, me ruined by excess attention, him molded by absence. It was a profound observation that summarized decades of damage in a simple sentence. Two sons, two mothers, two divergent paths that finally had crossed in tragic circumstances. Healing would be a long process, maybe endless. But for the first time since that fateful day in my kitchen, I could glimpse a future where the three of us, marked by our scars, but not defined by them, could build something resembling a family. It would not be the family we should have had from the beginning. That possibility was stolen from us 40 years ago in a hospital room with a lie that altered the course of our lives. It would be something different, something forged in pain but sustained in truth. And perhaps with time, that truth would turn out to be more valuable than any fantasy of family perfection I might have imagined. Today, 3 years after that fateful afternoon in my kitchen, I look at my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the woman looking back. The scars around my eyes have faded with time, but they are still there, reminding me daily of the journey that changed my life forever. A journey of betrayal, discovery, and finally redemption. When Gavin threw acid in my eyes, believing blindness would make me an easy victim to manipulate, he never imagined that act of cruelty would unleash a chain of events revealing secrets buried for 4 decades. Neither he nor I knew then that he was being manipulated by his own twin brother, Mark, whose existence had been hidden from me by my late husband, Robert. The New Light Center now occupies a 3-story building in the heart of the city. Every morning when I open its doors, I remember the long road that brought me here. From feigning total blindness to protect myself and gather evidence to discovering the devastating truth about the son snatched from me at birth. The walls of this center, painted in warm tones that even my limited vision can appreciate, have witnessed hundreds of stories of overcoming similar to mine. Gavin was released 6 months ago after serving 3 years of his sentence and showing exemplary behavior. Intensive therapy transformed the bitter and resentful man into someone capable of facing his demons with courage. Now he works at the center, teaching computer skills adapted for visually impaired people. Seeing his evolution has been one of the most precious gifts of this painful experience. Mark is still in prison, but he has only 2 years left until his first sentence review. Our weekly visits have evolved from tense encounters full of recriminations to deep conversations where we both try to reconstruct the missing pieces of our lives. I discovered he inherited my passion for baking, although he never had a chance to develop it professionally. I bring him ingredients and recipes he tests in the prison kitchen, connecting us through the art that has defined my life. The most surprising thing has been witnessing the slow approach between the twins. After months of mutual rejection, they began to recognize themselves in the other, finding similarities that transcended their separate upbringings. They have the same laugh, the same thoughtful gesture of scratching their chin, the same natural ability for numbers. It is as if nature had found ways to maintain their connection, despite distance and time. Anderson's Bakery continues to thrive under the shared management of Rachel and partially Gavin. On weekends, I still allow myself the pleasure of baking some specialties, guiding myself more by touch and smell than by sight. My hands remember what my eyes can no longer fully see, the exact texture of perfect dough. The precise moment bread must come out of the oven. My vision will never be what it was. The damage to my left eye was permanent, and although the right allows me to distinguish shapes and colors, I still depend partially on my white cane and adaptations in my daily environment. However, I have come to value this new way of perceiving the world. Sometimes, when we lose a sense, the others sharpen in unexpected ways. My intuition, my listening ability, my tactile sensitivity have developed exponentially. If there is a lesson I would like to share with you, dear viewers, it is that darkness is never absolute. Even in the blackest moments of our lives, there is always a small light, a crack of hope to cling to. For me, it was that limited peripheral vision the acid failed to destroy. For you, perhaps it is an unbreakable friendship like Rachel's, a dedicated professional like Lieutenant Evans, or simply the inner certainty that you deserve better than abuse or betrayal. Revenge was never my real goal. Although initially moved by the desire for justice and protection, what I really sought was the truth. And the truth, however painful, liberated me from a life built on lies. It allowed me to meet the son I believed dead, understand the complexities that led Gavin down such a dark path, and finally heal wounds I did not even know I had. Today, at 71 years old, I look back not with bitterness, but with a strange gratitude for the road traveled. The physical and emotional scars I carry are maps of survival, not marks of victimization. They are tangible proof that we can face the unthinkable and emerge not intact, but whole. Now, dear friends who have accompanied me in this story, I want to ask you something important. If my story has touched your hearts, if it has resonated in some corner of your lives, please do not let this moment fade without action. Subscribe to the Elderly Stories channel to know other stories of overcoming like mine. Real stories of people who, like me, faced the impossible and found a path to the light. Leave your comment below sharing which part of my story impacted you most, or perhaps briefly telling some experience of overcoming of your own. Each comment you leave creates a support community for those who might be going through similar situations and need to know they are not alone. And I do not say it lightly. I personally read every comment. I value every word of support or reflection you share. A simple like on this video might seem a small gesture, but it means much more than you imagine. Every interaction helps these stories reach more people who might desperately need them. Someone who perhaps right now is facing their own version of the moment Gavin threw acid at me. That instant when life changes irrevocably. If you can, I also ask you to support us on the Thanks button, our donation platform. Creating quality daily content implies significant costs, deep investigation of every case, travel for interviews, recording equipment, professional editing. Every contribution, however small, allows us to continue bringing these stories of overcoming to your screens daily. Your financial support is not just a transaction. It is an investment in visibility for topics society prefers to ignore. Visit our other videos too. The Elderly Stories channel houses dozens of equally powerful testimonies. The story of Margaret, who recovered her grandchildren after her daughter was a victim of domestic violence. The tale of Jack, who at 80 faced the corporation poisoning his town's river. The fight of hope against the banking system that tried to strip her of her home after her husband's death. I say goodbye with a heart full of gratitude for having listened to me. As I always say to those who come to the New Light Center seeking help, scars do not define our future. They only tell where we come from. What is truly important is where we decide to go next. Until the next video here on the Elderly Stories channel, remember to subscribe. Activate notifications with the bell button so you do not miss any story. Leave your valuable comment. And if you can support us on the Thanks button, each of these gestures makes it possible for more stories like mine to reach those who need them most. Together, we are creating much more than a channel. We are building a digital shelter where difficult stories can be told without judgment and listened to with compassion. A space where grandmothers like me with visible and invisible scars can transform our personal tragedies into beacons of hope for others. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. And above all, thank you for remembering with me that even after the acid, after the betrayal, after the deepest pain, there is always the possibility of redemption and light.